What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you want to support me, you can always use my TCGplayer link in the description down below, or like, comment, and subscribe. Now, let's get into our weekly budget build on Nahiri. I like this girl because it's a Boros commander that 1, reduces her casting cost, and 2, has card advantage attached to her. So we've got a lot of value up front right away. And the way we are going to abuse her is we're going to use Living Weapon and 4 Mirrodin to go ahead and cast our equipment, and they will already be equipped. That way, whenever we shove her onto the battlefield, we can attack with creatures automatically, netting us that value and playing those equipment cards for free. So it goes like this. We're going to cast a lot of equipment cards. It's going to feel like Equipment Storm. We're going to play our commander. We're going to get free equipment, and then we have a lot of creatures that get value off of either being equipped or equipment being on the battlefield. We all know Boros does equipment well, and that's exactly what this deck does. It does equipment very well. So if that's what you want to get into, if that sounds like a deck tech you'd like, let's get into it. We'll kick it off with our equipment that comes in attached to a creature. We have Kimba's Banner. This one's super solid. It's going to buff our commander up equal to the amount of creatures we control, and we do have a lot of ways to go pretty wide in this deck. Batterskull, a super solid equipment. It's even more solid when we don't have to pay 5 mana for it. Scythe Claw, again, I don't put this in a lot of my equipment decks because 5 mana is pretty steep for this effect, but since we don't have to pay the equip cost if we exile it with our commander, I figured I'd throw it in here and, start halving some life totals. Why not? Hexplate Wallbreaker, super solid, comes in attached to a creature, which is exactly what we want, and now we're getting additional combat steps, which will trigger our commander even more. Glimmer Lens, we're getting card advantage. I like it, more card advantage in Boros. Bladehold War Whip, not only will this lower the equip cost of all of our equipment, it's additionally just going to give a creature double strike. Cauldron Complete, another super steep cost, right? But again, we can cheat that out with our commander, and once we do, we're going to get a 5/5 with first strike, trample, indestructible, haste, and whenever this creature does combat damage to a creature, exile that creature. That sounds pretty solid. Nettle Cyst, this can buff our commander to the literal moon. We are playing a lot of artifacts and equipment, and like I said, this is basically like an equipment storm deck. That's how it feels, and honestly, it's kind of fun to play. Moving on, we're going into the vanilla stuff, so I'm going to blaze through this. We have Ancestral Blade, Sickle Slicer, Mortar Pod, Gold Warden's Helm, Hex Gold Halberd, Flare Husk, Batterbone, and finally, Barbed Battle Fist. The only goal with these cards in the deck is 1, to lower the cost of our commander because they're all super cheap and come down early. Then once we cast our commander, get it onto the battlefield, all of our equipment is already going to be equipped to creatures, so we can go ahead and attack, exile a lot of cards from the top of our library, and get a lot of value off of those cards. Moving on, we have some other equipment we run in the deck. We have Mace of the Valiant, Horn of Valhalla, and Pin and Blade. This is going to buff our commander or our creatures, judging on how much creatures we have on the battlefield. Like I said, there is a go wide strategy put into this deck, and we will get to that later. Dragon Throne of Tarkir, again, this one's super solid. Equip it to your biggest creature, tap that creature, and buff our entire board. We can take people out with this. Thran Power Suit can buff a creature up pretty big. Black Blade Reforged, again, we can get away with putting this in this deck, 1, because it's an equipment deck, and 2, because we are actually playing a decent amount of lands. We're never missing our land drops. We're just exiling too much cards off of the top of our library and giving ourselves so much options. Luxodon Warhammer, super solid, +3, trample, lifelink. Argentium Armor, I never put this in a deck, but this seems like the perfect deck to try it out in. We're going to go ahead and cast it for free, hopefully. If not, it's worth a try. Trepanation Blade, this is a perfect one to throw in the deck and just buff your commander to the moon and start punishing that player that always puts like 33 lands in his deck. Tenzagoto's Maul. I like this because 1, our commander's red, so it's an auto-include. Our commander's going to get +3/+3, and it's going to have trample, which is going to be perfect. Let's move on to the core of the deck. We have Adriana, Captain of the Guard. Melee is a super awesome ability. I think people sleep on it. +3/+3 is what it's going to give to all of our creatures as long as we're attacking every opponent, which is going to be perfect because we have a lot of really small creatures in this deck that just want to attack for value. Jazal Goldmane, another super card that can buff our entire board for that go-wide strategy. Brunor Battlehammer. I like this guy because, again, we're playing a lot of really small creatures, but all of those small creatures are equipped. So this guy's going to buff all of our equipped creatures, and it will lower the equip cost. Super solid. Esther. This guy digs us really deep, but what we really want him for is lowering the equipment cost of all of our equipment. Kimba Ka Regent. This is one of the ways we can go super wide. We just equip a lot of equipment onto this guy, and we just start and we just start creating a lot of 2/2 white cats. Zerium Golden Wind. This guy can get out of control pretty quickly. We're just going to keep doubling the amount of griffins we have on the board. Athari Sun Glory will work perfectly with those 4 Mirrodin cards because, again, we have a lot of rebels to sacrifice, and then Athari can start creating a pretty big board state of rebels by itself. Krinko, 10 Street Kingpin, one of the ones we want to equip to the moon, put a lot of counters on it, and just start creating a lot of goblins. Valduck, Keeper of the Flame. This one's super solid. It's not our best one to equip to the moon, but hey, if he's the only option we got, he can create a pretty board state. It will go away after that, but we can deal a lot of damage with this guy. Oscar the Reconstructor. If we lose our equipment cards, we will need to get them back, and this guy can do exactly that. We will start exiling them from our graveyard to create token copies of them, to then lower the cost of our commander once again, because at this point our commander's dead. I assume we use this guy in case of a board wipe. Do not throw this guy on the battlefield if you have not lost everything on the board, because you throw him on the battlefield and lose everything on the board, then you've lost him, and he's one of the ways this deck can rebuild. Another solid way this deck can rebuild if they destroy all your creatures is Golden Warden's Gambit. Assuming you haven't lost your equipment, this will be super cheap, and then when you finally do replay your commander, you will already have equipped creatures to start attacking and getting that sweet value. Moving on to ramp, we have Explorer Scope. Super solid. It keeps our top deck free of any of those lands while ramping us. You gotta love it. Goldvein Pickaxe, Beamtown Beatstick, by the way, that's super fun to say, and Prying Blade are super solid cards. We're going to create treasure tokens whenever our creatures deal combat damage. Additionally, they're just super solid cards that come down early and start lowering the cost of our commander. Baloth. This is another guy we'd want to just make massive. Now we're forcing our opponents to attack, and whenever attacking or blocking creatures die, we're just getting value off of that. Arcane Signet, Boros Signet, boring but effective. Fire Diamond, Marble Diamond, also super effective. And lastly, we have that Soul Ring. Moving on to card advantage, we have Akiri Fearless Voyager. Not only is this card advantage, but it can protect our equipped creatures. Jor-Kadeen can not only get massive in this deck, but it's going to give us a solid source of card advantage. Commander Lyra Porter. This one's absolutely broken in the deck because she lowers the cost of all spells we cast from exile, and we're exiling a lot of cards with our commander, so it's just added benefit. You get card advantage while lowering the cost of all of our exiled spells, which is exactly what our commander does. Super solid. Saram will make this appearance. Honestly, if we get him onto the battlefield early, this just ups the insanity of the deck. He's a pretty crazy engine in this deck. Wyless Soul of Steel, another card that we can just throw all of our equipment on for some insane value. Naali Sun's Vanguard. This is super solid because now all of our tokens are going to have double strike, making them harder to kill. Additionally, when we buff them to the moon, that's going to matter, and this guy can really present lethal while giving us some solid card advantage. Ren's Resolve and Reckless Impulse, super solid early game cards to draw us into our lands, our mana rocks, just smooth out our early game. That's our goal with these ones. Moving on to removal, we have Vikya. Now, 5 mana is pretty steep for this, but removing someone's commander over and over and over again can be extremely annoying. Additionally, hey, if we get enough equipment on her, we can start taking out players because her power is so massive. Generous Gift and Chaos Warp are super solid for getting rid of those permanent issues. Disenchant can target those artifacts and enchantments. Then we have Chain Reaction. We run a lot of little creatures, so 9 times out of 10 this is going to wipe the entire board out. Blasphemous Act, this one, 1 mana, wipes the entire board out. And that's going to do it for the deck tech, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know this is just a budget brew, but I think this commander can be extremely powerful, especially if you throw an extra like $50 at her. So, as always, guys, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I'll see you in the next one.